Okay. Hi everyone again. Sorry for that little glitch and that little wait. I'm hoping that this is going to work a bit better. I'm having to literally wait for the ads to play on my own channel to be able to see. But I can see, okay, great. This looks like it's working. Looks like it's doing what we need it to do. Thank God. So, I'm gonna recap. Great. I'm gonna just do a quick recap for anyone who's joining off of the fresh notification that goes out on that. This is a stream on how to make games in Twine using Harlow, that specific type of coding for the game. And basically, we've done a couple of streams so far. These are every other week. And this one is going to be about using variables. I'm just making sure that people know. Okay, so we basically looked at some earlier things which were more about visuals and how something looks to make it look swank, etc. And what we're doing now is more behind the scenes stuff that won't necessarily be seen by players, but will affect how things are for them playing. So basically a variable is something that can change throughout the course of the game, and you can determine how it changes with code. Something that, you might think of from like classic text adventure games would be, hit points. Someone gets hurt in a game and so their points go from like 5 to 4, or, Sims or whatever, happiness scores or things like that. Those are all things that would be variables that people might be paying attention to. So we're going to start with some very simple stuff. If we do get onto things like inventories, that is going to get a bit more complex, but I promise when this is put on YouTube, I'll put the relevant code underneath the video so that you can just copy and paste from there. It'll be super simple, I promise. So I did start this stream with the idea that I would just be like, I'll make a cup of tea generator, like having a cup of tea with a friend. How cute, how very fantasy. And I've really not pushed ahead with that. You can see this is a little bit messy here. But what we're going to do, actually, let me just make sure that once I've got it open, hopefully it comes up pretty central. Okay, I'll just shift this a little bit. So you've got a slightly better view of what's going on here. So I don't know why I've got all these variables here. Let's do that. So let's just mark this as variable samples at the top. And let's say, if we're going to go with the whole tea thing, you ask your friend for how much sugar they'd like. And I'll show you two ways of how you could do variables. I mean, there are more ways. I will show you as many ways as I have, but we'll start off with two different ways of how much sugar they'd like in their tea. Now, there are a couple of ways you could do this, this choice. It could be that you list a few options, like no sugar. This is not the full code that you'll need, but this is me just thinking it up. 1 sugar. And for the moment, we'll just do it as 2 sugars. So that's just the link. Anything that's, link and then speech marks is what the player will see. And then what you're going to want to put in there, you remember once you've used the link, you have to use square brackets and then put whatever you want to happen once they've clicked the link into square brackets. So this is basically, I'll show you down here. This is what it looks like roughly whenever you're setting a variable. You use the set command. So it's set : and you have to have a $ in front of variable, and you also, variable has to be something without any gaps in it. So $ variable, and then it's setting it to, because the only thing you can use with set is to. So set variable to, and then within some quotation marks, what you want it to be. So it might be something like set door to go very classical, to locked. There is one instance in which you don't need to use speech marks around the words, and that's if you're using numbers, which fortunately we're going to do up here. So here you'd go set, and let's just call it sugar cubes. I'll tell you in a sec. To 0, and then round that off with the thing. And remember, Twine has little ways of telling you when something isn't used or doesn't have a partner, or the code isn't quite complete. And you can see that this over here, this goes bold the moment that I do the other square bracket to try and help remind you that it still needs to be done. So in that case, we're going to go set sugar cubes to 1. And then for this last one, we're going to go set sugar cubes 2. So this is one way of doing it. And obviously what this means, there's certain limits to say doing this way. It means that the player is only ever going to have the options that you put in front of them. So if you want them to potentially go up to having like 10 sugar cubes, you will have to write out all of those. I'll show you exactly how this looks on the game when it comes up. I think, to be honest, before I mean, oh God, sorry, I had to change. I'm just seeing this now coming up. Sorry, that was coming up in the wrong one because I have so many damn windows open, and it was getting in the way of subtitles, which is great. I am actually going to just remove some stuff from because I was showing you personally, I don't really want to look at a game that has this text of this size against this color background. So I am just going to take this out of the story style sheet so that we can have something that looks a little bit more easy on the eye. And I will also just pull that across so you can see all of the text as well. There we go. Sorry. When I fixed the visuals, I had to do a lot of very sudden scaling of images. So, what have I done? One sec. What on earth is getting in the way right here? Here we go. Let's just move these little bits out of the way and make it look at least like a modicum of professionalism, even though this is the one that I definitely prepped the least for. So you can see you ask your friend, and all we've got is the stuff in the links. And I click 1 sugar. Now, it's just disappeared. The bad thing is I've no idea as a player what's going on. Like, have I actually changed anything? How do I know what on earth is happening? As a maker, what I'm just going to do is I've just shifted the view to the corner of the screen. And you can see down here, it says sugar cubes, the number 1. So let's say if I click this, sugar cubes goes to the number 2. So if you're looking at this as a maker, you can always use the little debug that comes up in the corner to actually follow and make sure that it's working as it should. However, the players don't have that luxury. of looking at debug mode. So we're going to need to put something in and have something change visually for them. So let's go, in fact, back to the game. Now, I did mention, like, oh, I'm going to put the variable as sugar cubes, not sugar. It's because I think that somewhere over here, I might have used like a sugar variable, or I might have a reference to sugar. That's one big thing. Variables, you want to make them distinct. You want to make them different. Whether that is, you know, having it almost akin to a sentence. I definitely know that I end up having variables that read almost like sentences. Or if you just differentiate them with things like numbers. Like you go sugar 1 or sugar 2, or that kind of thing. But basically, a variable is maintained across the game. And what I mean by that is that if you have something that changes the number of sugar cubes you have in one passage, and then you have another one that sets or changes the number of sugar cubes you have in another passage, then that will affect the same variable. And so what you don't want to do, like I once made a game and I had in totally different areas a variable called escape. And I had forgotten that I used it twice. It was meant to affect totally different things. And what it meant was weird stuff was happening in the game because people were changing. There was one variable basically that was meant to ended up getting used for two things when it needed it to be two variables. So that's why I was doing sugar cube rather than sugar, to make it just distinct and make sure it acted as a specific thing. But anyway, here we go. So let's go and do something a bit different. I'm going to try and keep this a little bit simpler. Again, just my entire setup having to shift like right at the beginning because of my own damn mistakes. We could get onto some things like display and stuff like that. We're not going to in this session, I don't think. We'll probably get onto things like displaying other passages within passages next time. But for now, what we're going to do is just say that we're going to go to sugar done, and we'll make a passage called sugar done, and I'll use that to show you how you can use variables to affect what people see. So all of these, once you click them, you'll go to sugar done. This will also mean that, because you saw me just playing this little section, that I could click one sugar and then I could click two sugars. And you might not want your players to be able to do that. It also might be confusing for players. They might think that gives them 3 sugars when it doesn't. So let's make a passage. We're going to call it sugar done. Again, remember about capitalization. Capitalization also applies for variables. If I had a variable which was sugar with a lowercase s and a variable which was sugar with an uppercase s, those would be treated by the game as separate variables doing different things. So you have that. Right. Here's where you can start to use variables to change what people might experience in the game so that it feels like it's responding a bit more to their specific choices. So you use if as you would set. So it becomes if sugar cube is, and it's always is, it's never are, just because this is computer language, not like actual language with grammar. It's you know, the Harlow language. So it's always if variable is this thing. So if sugar cube is 0, there is no sugar in the tea. And basically all this means is that if that variable is at that value, I think is the proper language, that's the text that's going to show. However, if sugar cube, I don't normally use this keyboard, is 1, there is a bit of sugar in the tea. This isn't necessarily the clearest player feedback, but just this is more as an example. And if sugar cube is 2, there is plenty of sugar in the tea. Anyone who saw the last session will recognize what I'm about to do, but I am just going to put all of that within a curvy set of brackets, because basically if I don't put that in a curvy set of brackets, say that I chose to have 2 sugars in my tea, this would show up with a gap at the top where the unused code would be. But what putting stuff within curly brackets does is it means that it doesn't show unused code. You don't end up with unintentional like white space, as it were. So especially when you're starting to get into using a lot more code like this, you're going to want to use some curly brackets. So let's just going to check that it's sugar done and it's sugar cubes. Okay, well I'm gonna change this to sugar cubes and this to sugar cubes so I can also show you the error and what it will come up like as an error. So internet, there we go. You ask your friend for how much sugar they like in their tea. If I click 1 sugar, so this is an error that we get when the variable isn't right. You can see there is a bit of sugar in the tea, and that's showing up because there is 1 sugar cube. However, no sugar in the tea is coming up because we've got the wrong variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very quickly go into Twine. I'm going to change and make sure all of them say sugar cubes and none of them say sugar cube singular. It's really small things like that that can become kind of frustrating, but as soon as you get into a rhythm of remembering it, then you're fine. And if I now go for 1 sugar, I've got a bit of sugar in the tea. If I go for 2 sugars, I've got plenty of sugar in the tea. If I go for no sugar, I've got no sugar in the tea. There's one thing I am just gonna look at because it's a slightly different type of error, and I want to see if it comes up in the way that I think it will. Okay, so basically the reason that we were getting the no sugar in the tea when it still said sugar cube and not sugar cubes is because it was if sugar cube is 0 and there were no presets anywhere else for sugar cube, so it treated it as being at 0, which made it show up. But yes, that's just like a little bit of the importance on being very up on exactly what your variables are and having to keep track of that. That can sometimes be something where actually the search and replace feature on Twine is quite useful, because what you can do is, can you just see? Yeah, you can just see. You go here, and what you can always do is go, I'm going to search for sugar cubes, and I've got 3 matches there, I've got 2 matches there, and now I'm going to search for sugar cubes singular. Oh, okay, there is still 1 that's outlying. What you'll notice is the one thing that I've done is I've had to put a space afterwards because obviously sugar cube is contained within sugar cubes, but if I put a space, then I'll see if there's 1 that's wrong, and I can go in here, I can type sugar cubes, replace all, and now it's going to be fine. Obviously there you have to be pretty confident that you're only getting instances that you definitely want to change. If I was using 2 sets of variables, if I had a sugar cube variable and a sugar cubes variable, I wouldn't be as confident changing things in search and replace. But yes, that's a little, what I tend to use the search and replace for is for checking out typos, things that aren't quite correct. Now I mentioned this isn't the only way to do this. What you could also do is, again, right now we're just gonna use link. That I'll show you that you can use other things. Basically, like when you use variables, as long as you're using the set variable to what you want it to be, you're fine. That's the core thing. You don't have to always use it in conjunction with go to a place. You don't have to use it in conjunction with a link. You know, just to prove that you don't have to always use it in conjunction with a link, let's say we're going to make something called add sugar. Now, I can't remember the proper name for this. I showed it in like the first session when I was showing different ways of linking to different places or clicking on things. But so what we've done here is we've just made add sugar into a clickable thing. I'm going to do click replace. I think I'm gonna have to check this, but and then add sugar. So remember, whatever you've put here in the little kind of tag between the like smaller than symbol and the upstanding line is what you're going to want it to be here. And yeah, that's a useful thing that Twine does again, where if I just click within this, it highlights this because it recognizes that they're the same thing. And so if you think things should be the same and you see that it's not doing that, it's telling you that something's wrong, that there's something, because for instance, if I had that, it's not bringing it up. Okay, there's a typo. If I have that, okay, it's capital, it's wrong. Okay, it's highlighted, it's matching. The game, the code, the software recognizes that it's the same thing. So I go click replace, add sugar, and I need to, you know, I've got my little set of curvy parentheses, curvy brackets, curved brackets. I need to put something in square brackets for it to do something with that. So what we're going to do is, actually, you know what? I'm just going to take this away. Set sugar cubes to it plus 1. So this is the other way that you can do things with numbers. If you're doing variables that are words or states like locked, unlocked, found, happy, etc., you're going to want to use just the set something to, and then, you know, in speech marks, what you want that text to be or what you want that value to be. But if you're working with numbers, you have a couple of options, and you can do this, which is set something to it plus 1, which, as you might guess, just raises the value by +1. For the purposes of this, I'm going to take this out because I need to prove a point. And then let's say we're also going to go to variable samples, which is the title of this passage. You can link yourself back to a passage and create a loop if you ever want to. For this, I just want to do that so I can kind of like keep clicking adding sugar and show you how that functions. Now, if I was to do this, I don't think Twine is currently smart enough to avoid the mistake that I think it's going to make, but you know, let's see. So I've got this. You ask your friend for how much sugar they'd like in their tea. Add sugar. This is great. So previous versions, as far as I was aware, you would always have to say that something was 0. You would have to give it a starting value. You would have to say, like, set sugar cubes to 0 at the very beginning, or like at least before you came to any changes that you wanted to be in the game. However, what's really great is if I do some laborious dragging, you can see in the corner here in the debug that I've got sugar cubes is currently at the number 1. I'm going to keep clicking add sugar, and you can see, and it's just going up. And I can keep doing this for as long as I want, and I will just keep having more and more sugar added. So that kind of shows you, obviously, the difference between those two options is you as a designer making the game, you have much more control if you're doing the link, add 1 sugar, add no sugar, add 2 sugar, and those are the sole options that you give to a player. However, it feels potentially, in this case, more natural, like, adding more sugar. And it also gives a lot more scope to what the results might be. It gives a lot more over to the player if you've just got this add sugar, add sugar, add sugar thing, where you're just increasing it by 1. Of course, you can, if you can add something by 1, then you can also take out sugar. I mean, obviously, I'm aware this isn't how tea works. Take sugar. But just to show it for the principle, click, take sugar, set sugar cubes to it -1, and then we'll come back here again. Variable samples. And you know what? We'll add something in so that I'm, for one thing, so I'm not having to constantly drag the screen back and forth. Sugar in tea right now. Sugar cubes. So this is the other thing that you might want variables for, and they can be very useful for, is just actually showing a visible tracker to your players. You might want that just to be showing that they are very happy, or they're very sad, or they have these many weapons, or they've been jumping over this many clouds, that kind of thing. And so what that will do is I'm gonna just, this is great. I'm gonna show you what's happening right now. So this is because it's been going for a little bit of time. If I just refresh it, if I reopen the thing. Now, we're not gonna stress. Basically, we just know that something's gone wrong. And I can already see what's gone wrong in the game. So let's take that away. Again, it's just one of those things that's about details. I didn't need to put a bracket there. That's partially a habit from using different kinds of commands and stuff that are more complex. But what it meant is that because I had a bracket there, you can see that this one is not bolded. There's nothing that actually attaches it to anything, and so it was just automatically doing it. It was just doing it all the time, which is why it was taking everything down. So if we take that out and then go here. So this is why I make mistakes, so that you can learn from them, and also so you don't worry or feel overwhelmed when you see them. So here, this is quite useful. The number 0 cannot be attached to this hook. You know what I said about the game was being smart, and it was picking up about how many sugar cubes there were. It was just treating it as 0. This is why, if you have something like this, you want to set it before you're going to come to that. So all we're going to do, it's not hugely complicated. We don't need to worry too much. Just at the very top of this, we're going to put set sugar cubes to 0. And that just means that it has something to go off. If you ever have a variable that shows up in text like we're putting in here, and you don't tell the game what it is before it's meant to show up, it will give you one of those purple error messages. It will say that this thing cannot be 0. And that's even if it's something that you're not anticipating making a numerical number, it's just how the game expresses that. So bringing that up. That's interesting. Okay, I thought I could be clever, and I thought I could just do it real easy and not have to make a new passage. I'm gonna need to make a new passage, which is what I would normally do. Normally I'd actually set a lot of variables at the very top of the game. Variable samples, because basically I was getting the error message again, but that's because I was also telling the game what the variables were at the exact same time that it was meant to be showing them, because everything on that page is getting processed at the same time. And so what I actually need to do is make sure that it knows what the variable is before we get to that page. So what I've done is I've just made a little thing. So we're going to launch it from there. Let's bring that up so you can see what I'm seeing. So we've got variable samples. Okay, so I've done some, like, I think I know what I've done. Yeah, that's an error from me. That's not, that wasn't the thing that I thought it was. How about, that's really interesting. That's very interesting. So I have used variables like this in games before, where it is cannot be attached to this hook. I'm going to double check something, and I'm now going to just have a quick look at something. Yeah, that is bizarre. Okay. Just having a couple of experiments to see what's going to make this show. That's really interesting. I've not had this before, so this might be something that I have to actually clarify in the next session, because I'm realizing the time that we've got as well. That's really curious. Okay. Right. Yeah, I'm gonna, what we'll do is we'll use the debug to show what's happening and to prove that it's working. And I'll have a little investigate, but also you don't want a stream that is just me silently trying to look at what's going on. So let's kind of have a little look here. So we've got debug, and you can't quite see, unfortunately, I'm very sorry. But I'm gonna kind of go for like add sugar, add sugar, add sugar, add sugar. Oh no, I've added too much. I want to take some out. I'm gonna take some out. So you can see there following that there is bits and pieces there. And that you can both take a number up and you can take a number down. So obviously you might not be doing stuff with numbers. I was super ambitious to think that we would get onto inventories today. We will do inventories next week, because they make sense with how variables work, and it's a way of showing people variables and such like. And so here we are. Of course, you might not have that. You might not be using numbers. You might instead have something where you want something to go from one state to another, to be true or false, to be locked or unlocked, to be on or off. So what we're going to do here is, just so we've got something, set kettle to off. So we're just going to track something that's going from off to on. And for the moment, actually, I will also, just to make sure, I will put the set kettle to off here. Now, even though it's underneath the clickable thing, the game will just recognize all of that as stuff to be implemented at the same time. It's not kind of, the game doesn't like read it from top to bottom. So it will still count the kettle as off, even though it's underneath the thing that we're going to click on to get there. So let's turn this into a link. Do you want to turn it on? Then add the square brackets, set kettle to on, and I'm gonna keep sending us in a little loop to this page. Variable samples. Obviously, I've been using the loop so that we can come back and we can kind of click things. You don't have to do that in order to keep clicking the same thing, but I will get into that on a later stream. There are things like link repeat and click replace and stuff like that where you can create these loops, as it were, where people can keep clicking the same thing but without having to go back to the same page. I'm just using this right now because it's the easiest way of not making the language I'm using in this particular stream any more complex. So, and what we're going to do also now, you can see here that this isn't highlighted, that this isn't bolded, so we actually need 2 at the end here. I'm also going to go if kettle is on, the kettle is on, you can hear it boiling. So it's just going to be that, but that will at least show the player that their choice has been made. And you know what, I'm also going to, so because you've probably noticed that there's been spaces abounding when we've been doing this in the browser. Just going to make this all a nice shade of blue by putting some fully curved brackets at the top and at the end. So just double checking that I think I've put that all in right. We're going to go from the previous thing. This will be, so let's just bring this up. You'll see that everything is all currently running on one line because I added those curved brackets, but I didn't do the paragraph breaks like I showed in the previous session. I'll do them in a second just for anyone who didn't see that session. It's really simple. It's just that those curvy brackets take out all that blank space and they then don't recognize any kind of new lines. So you have to program in new lines. So we've got the kettle is off. Do you want to turn it on? Okay, yeah, I'm going to turn it on. You ask your friend how much sugar, the kettle is on. You can hear it boiling. So we've now started to change text based on what the player has clicked. However, it's a bit hard for them to read. So just going to hop back into the game and going to put a few of these in. So remember, it's kind of smaller than p greater than for the start of the line that you want to be a standalone line, and then it's smaller than /p greater than for the end of the line, just to separate them out. And I'm gonna put one here as well, so that add sugar and take out sugar aren't on the same line, and we'll be able to see that that looks a lot more pleasant when we actually bring it up here. So the kettle's off. Do you want to turn it on? Yeah, sure, I'd like to turn it on. The kettle's on. You can hear it boiling. Obviously, that's a very small, straightforward thing, but it shows you how you can use a variable that the player changes, and then how that can affect text. Equally, that can affect sound. It can affect images. Anything that you put within those square brackets, so anything you put in here, you can put the code that we've used beforehand to add an image in. You can use the code we've used beforehand to add sound in. You can have a whole new set of text. You can have links to new places that aren't available unless someone's made that variable what you want it to be. So, I mean, obviously one of the most common ones for that would be is if magic key, for instance, is found. You can put the key into the special T cupboard, open it, and then you'd be able to go to a special passage called open it that you can only get to if you found the magic key, because the only place that we've actually put a clickable link for open it is within the square brackets that follow if magic key is found. Since we're getting kind of close to the hour, what I'm going to say is a final couple of bits and pieces. Now, here I've always put the variable, whether it's a number that's going up or down or being set to a very specific number, or whether it's, you know, on or off, I've set it within something that a player clicks. However, you might actually just want to be tracking something that the player doesn't have control over. For instance, you might want to be able to track how many rooms they've been in, or maybe it is like a kind of player status, and, you know, we've got a case. So let's say set thirsty to 1. And we're just going to create a new little passage called wait for tea. Over here. Oh, I've pulled that. Sorry, I've pulled that out of vision. It's not a huge detail, but you know. Set thirsty to it plus 1. I mean, you could also, if you, I'm doing this because it feels more natural to be like, okay, more passages, more thirst. You could also go, no, set thirsty to 32. You've suddenly become incredibly thirsty, but to it plus 1. Because what you might want to do is just track how thirsty a player is, and then if they just make a lot of choices that are, you know, they put off making tea for too long in this cup of tea generator, they get to a point where it's let's say, okay, to it plus 32. Wait some more. I can handle it. And then we go here. If thirsty is okay, so I'm going to go from here. Again, it's not the prettiest because we didn't put in the paragraph break, the line break, but you click wait for tea, and just to absolutely prove it, because it started off as 1, we added 32 to it. You can see in the corner that it says that it's at 33. So when we actually click through here, it just says you're too thirsty. And it's not that the player has actively clicked on things going, I would like to be more thirsty. It's just that there's been something going on in the computer's, you know, the game's background that you've been tracking, that then has some kind of impact on the text that is shown. I'm trying to think, I mean, if there is anything, anyone who's watching, feel free to say in the chat if you're like, oh, I don't know if I follow this thing, or what if I wanted to use variables for this, or can the game do this kind of thing with variables? Absolutely throw that into chat because there's a few more minutes left. I don't know if there's anything major more for me to say, but obviously the benefit of this setup is that you can let me know if there's something you want to know more about. Because what we'll do in the next session is look at inventories. I think inventories, to be honest, that's only going to take us half the session. Inventories is actually one of those things that it takes a while because you're looking for where it is on the internet. And there's a couple of troubleshooty things that sometimes you run into. But that's quite a lot of straightforward stuff. So we'll probably look at inventories and then a few more bits. I'm going to investigate, like, I do not know why that variable is not showing for me, why I want it to show that way. I don't know why I can't just get things to show up in the way that I would like them to. I'm just going to see something like thirsty, because normally if I just put a variable in like that, interesting. Okay, we're learning. It's something it doesn't like about how I did that specific sugar cube thing, because, sorry, let me just show you. I was here, I waited for tea, wait some more, I can handle it. And it is showing exactly how thirsty I am, which is really interesting. I'm just going to see if it had an issue with colons. Thirst level, thirsty. I'm just going to see, because this might be why it... No. Okay. Interesting. So pretty much I was doing it right earlier. I'll just show you what I've got in Twine that's bringing up the thirst level. Here we are, thirst level thirsty. It might have been something because I've got so many loops going with the sugar cube thing, but basically if you do put just like variable without, like, not as a part of code, but just as the main text, it should show that variable. It should show the status so that your players can see exactly what that is. That has reminded me though of one important thing, which is that one of the reasons that I personally tend to eradicate this little button, this little back and forth thing, there is some code that you can use, which I'll mention it in the next one, which basically renders this invisible, which means that players don't have access to this in a game. One of the main reasons that I am very much in favor of taking this out is because it means that you have to be aware of that whilst you're also programming your variables. Because if you have something, for instance, if we have set thirsty to +32, and then we go to the next one, we're just going to go to set. Oh, actually, I shouldn't need to change anything. I'm going to go to, wait, some more, I can handle it. I'm going to go back. Interesting. You are not. Okay. Right, so thankfully the game isn't messing with what I want it to right now, but one of the things that you can end up having is that if someone is going back and forth using that arrow, not using the passages and the pathways and the links that you yourself have created, they could be changing variables. Especially if you're doing like number-based ones, that can cause a bit of a thing. And so I tend to like taking out that little back arrow because I don't want someone hopping back to an earlier page and say I've set something to 1. They've gone forward to a page that says set it to +3, and then they go forward to another page that says set it to +4, and then they go back using the back arrow when I hadn't planned for that, and then they set it to, and then it goes to +3 again. And now suddenly it's at, oh God, like 11 rather than like 8 where I wanted it to be. And that could mess up other things. So yeah, that's something to remember about variables. They can be, I mean, they are great. They mean that you can actually personalize things more. You can show the player that you're responding to their choices a lot more. There are ways you can fake variables if you still find them kind of scary. I'll very quickly show you how you could fake a variable or create the same effect. However, I'm only showing this just like kind of out of interest and out of sharing information. I don't think variables are that scary, but if for some reason maybe you're just having like a really rough day and variables aren't working and your troubleshooting isn't working, you're like, I just wish I could change this, then what you would simply do is you'd make it look like people were going to the same passage but they weren't. So add 1 sugar. And you just create a different pathway instead of changing the variables. Add 2 sugars. Now, you'll see the issue with this. Like, again, I'm showing this as just a, if you're interested in this, you sugar in your tea. Continue. You have 2 sugars. Tea. Continue. So this would potentially give a similar impression. Obviously, it's not actually changing any variables, and the reason that it's not as good is that once we've got to this continue passage, the game has no idea which the player chose. It doesn't know if they chose 1 sugar. It doesn't know if they chose 2 sugars. I guess what you could do, sorry, I was like, I'm going to play the game in the internet browser, but not show anyone me doing the thing in the internet browser. But like, you've got some sugar in your tea, continue, or 2 sugars, you've got 2 sugars, continue. So it might look to the player like it's responding to them, but it isn't, and then it doesn't know. However, again, if variables as part of links feels a bit too much, like it feels like there's too many bits of code at once, what you can do is set sugar cubes to 1 and just put that at the top of that passage. And then over here you can do set sugar cubes to 2. And then it will track it. The reason why I wouldn't personally use this method is just because it's going to get bulky. You're going to end up with a lot of passages that you don't necessarily need to have. That if you were just using like a link system, or this would all just be like 2 passages rather than 4. But this is a way where you can actually, so you've used the arrow to actually send people in 2 different directions, and depending on the direction they've gone, you've changed what the variable is, and then you send them back to the same place. So there's a few different ways of doing variables. I hope that's been useful. I apologize for the bit where I'm gonna look into why for some reason thirsty would show up as 33 and show the changing value, and sugar cubes just wasn't doing that for me. I will make sure I figure that out, and also I will put like an additional bit of info on the YouTube video on the upload. All of the kind of generic code for this, like I'll put the click version, the link version, the core variable code, that will be underneath the description of the YouTube video, which will be on the Roll Flip Draw YouTube channel, which is just that link that's in the chat now. Yes, I hope this has been useful. Genuinely feel free, if you're kind of watching these regularly, like say in chat, or feel free to like at me on Twitter at Chloe Mashiter. If there are particular things you're interested about learning. At the moment, I'm just kind of going in a very rough order of what makes sense to my brain. But I'm more than happy to try and angle these towards specific things that people are interested in or curious about. Because this stream is about just sharing the information and help people figure out this stuff so that they're not having to look through loads of the internet themselves. The next one will be in 2 weeks, like I say, it'll be kind of like probably a little bit of tidying up on variables and then onto inventories, and post that. I don't know what we'll look at. Maybe text entry, actually, where you can create little pop-ups where players can put in their own text, and then you can utilize that in games, which again is might seem scary at first. Fundamentally, it's just a piece of code that you either copy and paste until, for as much as you want, until you've like remembered how to just like do it yourself. Yeah. Twinery.org is where you can download this if you haven't already downloaded the software for Twine. Make sure to be using Harlow. This will be back in 2 weeks' time, and in the meantime, there will be next Saturday will be made up songs about made up people. Very different vibe. But if you like improvised songs about tabletop role-playing game characters, or if you want a song about your own tabletop role-playing character, then absolutely come along to that. There will be some more streams on this channel. I'm going to be doing some call outs probably next week for some new projects, some stuff that's kind of actual play but kind of isn't. Basically some experimental stuff that will be about streaming and tabletop gaming, which I'm excited about. So do keep an eye out here for any updates on that. I think that's kind of about... I feel like I've forgotten something. I probably have. Oh, thanks for your patience at the top, everyone. Apologies for the visual issues at the top, but managed to fix it soon enough. That's all we're going to do for this week. Okay, bye. Have a lovely weekend, everyone. Bye.